Just going to ask you to sit down when I mention the age group at which you came to faith. So if you came to faith 60 plus, please sit down. 50 plus, please sit down. 40 plus? 30 plus? 20 plus? 15 plus, 10 plus, 5 plus, less than 5. And you'll see in a little while why that is really significant to what I'm going to talk to you about. So, growing faith. Growing faith is not just another initiative. And if you hear nothing else that I say, it is not another initiative. Surely growing faith, those two words are at the foundation of our mission. It's the cornerstone of what we are trying to do, growing in our own faith and that of others, sharing Jesus' love and hope with as many as we can. So that's where I want to start with growing faith, because I don't want you to think that this is something else that we have to do. I'm kind of presuming we're all doing it already, hopefully. I'm going to give you an overview. There's so much I could say. Ben and I were both supposed to save 5 minutes on our presentation. Thanks, Ben.
That's right.
He didn't. It's hugely significant, growing faith, this vision from the House of Bishops. It's hugely exciting, and although my job title is about schools, this vision is not just about schools. It's about all of us, where we are, whether we work centrally in the diocese, all of the departments, our chaplaincies, our churches, our fresh expressions, our schools, our pioneer ministries. It's relevant to anyone. So please don't look at me and just think schools. So it's a vision that's come out of the House of Bishops. I've briefed Bishop staff team a couple of times on this. We've had some national training centrally that I've attended. At the clergy conference there were some briefings on it as well. And it's going to be, well, it should already be huge. So what is it? It's not new. It's a re-emphasis. It's a refocusing. And some of you will be sitting here thinking, well, that's what I already do. Fantastic. We need to infect each other with that. So I want to start with a few statistics. Ben's done a little bit of this, but when practicing Christians were asked what age they came to faith, very similar to that exercise at the beginning, 76%, 3/4 of practicing Christians came to faith before the age of 18. And there's just a little additional split. Very few of our parishes have more than 15 young people in them. Many have none at all. And the mission statistics that Bishop Rachel was talking about is that 28% decline in children nationally in our churches, and we didn't have that many to start with. It's fairly depressing, isn't it? I'm just going to depress you slightly more. Research shows that parents have the biggest influence on their children. I don't think we'd be surprised about that. This frightens me. 90%, I don't know about the other 10%, I don't know what they think, but the 90% think that it's important to teach their children about faith. But only 29% think it's their responsibility. Wowzers, how are the children going to learn then? How will our children of Anglican parents, learn about their faith if only 30% of parents want to pass it on? Much of that is because parents don't have the confidence to pass on their faith, but that's a whole different issue. So, growing faith. This is what it's about. It's a vision set by the House of Bishops, and it made me laugh a little bit at first. Culture change within the church. Wowzers, culture change. It's focused on ensuring that every aspect of our mission and ministry is seen through the lens, a phrase stolen from Bishop Rachel, of what it means for ministry with children, young people and households. And that's why I'm so excited about it. It's about our children and young people. It's not an initiative, it's not a bolt-on, it's not a box to tick, it's the foundation of our mission. And it's part of our life vision, the National Church of England vision for education, renewal and reform, setting God's people free. It's not an extra, it sits there at the bottom of everything we're doing. You'll notice it says households there. It's not very easy to see the red, my apologies. It deliberately doesn't say families, because if I say the word families to you, every single one of us in this room will have a different view of what a family looks like. Households could be made up of any type of group of people, so it's deliberate to say households. So where are our young people if they're not in our churches? I know some of you sitting looking around do have lots of young people, but young people are in churches, schools, not just Church of England schools, and they're in households. And these three contexts underpin everything that growing faith is all about. Oh, Ben, we've come to a great halt here. Can you be my glamorous assistant? So the next slide, did someone say Ben's not glamorous? That was very rude. That was very rude, Cheltenham. So these are the things that the vision, the aims of the vision, and they're unapologetic. So the first one is about, Ben, you'll have to do lots of clicking, I'm afraid.
All of them at once?
Yes, let's have them all at once. Every parish creating expressions of church. Not necessarily bums on seats and what we already do. We're not, as Ben said, we're not saying you have to come to us. It's about creating something new, potentially, going out to where our children and young people are. 100% of Anglican parents recognising the importance of sharing their faith with their children. 100%. Clergy and lay ministers who are confident in supporting households in sharing their faith at home. Congregations which nurture and support the faith of children and young people. Churches which have really good links with their local school communities. Obviously, I have a real passion for that, and hopefully every single one of you are aware of the 101 Ways document on the diocesan website, which are 101 ways that churches and schools can interact. If you're not, please talk to me afterwards. And also children and young people who are confident to share their faith with their peers and families. I wonder how your context is currently doing against those aims. I wonder if your context is all about getting a bottom on a seat on a Sunday. I wonder if your context talks about, well, we don't have any children. Not in the building, but there's an awful lot of them probably around you, most of you. Next slide, thank you, Ben. It's great to tell him what to do. Oh, this is being filmed, sorry. Oops. So those are those three contexts: schools, churches, and households. I think we do pretty well when we put two of them together and we work in the intersection between two spaces. Growing Faith seeks to look at all three of those in tandem. If we look at schools and churches, just sitting in front of me, there are some wonderful churches that have excellent relationships with their schools. And their schools have excellent relationships. So they're in the intersection between churches and schools. They're doing some great work. We have some great work with churches and households, churches and families. What we don't do very well is that sweet spot in the middle, where all three intersect. And this is what growing faith is all about. And Ben's just described something that hits that sweet spot right in the middle of households, churches and schools. I'm not here today to give you the answers to how we do that. I'm just describing to you the vision about how we might interact with our under 18s more. Ben talked a little bit earlier about things being a bit uncomfortable, and this next slide, can you go to the one after that, Ben, I think? So in the last 30 years, education has changed hugely. The way you were taught at school and the way I was taught at school and the way we teach at school now, the way we worship in schools, has changed massively, beyond recognition. But young people are not getting that same experience of change in many of our churches. It says up there, young people tell us that they're not often involved in decision making or giving any leadership responsibility. It really upsets me when people say, these children are the future of the church. They are not the future of the church. They are the now of the church. God loves them just as much as he loves people over 18. And they are just as precious, they are just as spiritual, and they have just as much to say about how Jesus loves them as we do. They are not the future, they are the now. And children feel that. Some research was done, and there's clearly a clash of cultures between many of our churches and our children and young people. And this will be uncomfortable, because this is what children and young people say they would like in our churches, and that it's missing in many of their contexts. They want to be included. They want to feel part of the whole church family. They don't want to be always separated and shipped off to children's church. They want to feel part of something intergenerational. But we think we're doing a good thing. We maybe sing something that's a bit more child-friendly, and then we ship them off to do something else. That's not what children always want. Some do, but not always. Children want to feel equal members of the church. They don't want to be the future, and they have to wait till they're 18 to be part of. They want to feel part of it now, and many of them don't. I think that's because we decide what we think children want, or we give them what we had. And that's not hitting the spot. Children want to be involved in leadership. In schools, they are involved in decision making, real decision making, not just lip service. They're not just acolytes and servers. They are involved in making decisions about worship. And they're also involved in leading worship. I would encourage you to go into some of our schools and watch children lead worship. It's amazing. They also want space to explore faith and life without being judged. This is what children and young people are telling us. And if we don't listen, I think it's at our peril. I appreciate that some of you will be sitting in front of me thinking, well, we do that. But it's not a culture that we see across the church in this country, and that's why we have so few children in our church. Growing faith isn't about just getting children into church, it's about growing their faith, and you don't have to be in a church building to grow faith. I think my question is, how are we going to respond to this, and where is the voice of the under 18s in your setting? Or are you deciding what under 18s want because it's what we want them to have? Ben, could you please just go back one slide? So, in saving 10 minutes, I've been very brief, and I'm sorry if I've skipped over lots of things. It's not an initiative. This growing faith is being called an adventure, and I quite like that because adventures can be a bit scary. You don't quite know what's going to happen, and it's probably going to take you outside your comfort zone. It's also not entirely new. It's a re-emphasis, a refocus on thinking about all the time, what does this decision mean for our children and young people? Every diocese has been asked to have a growing faith champion. I prefer the word challenger, and that's someone that sits on the bishop's staff team and is the persistent voice of children and young people, and I'm really excited that that's me. I will be a huge irritant because after every discussion at bishop's staff team, I'll be saying, what about our children and young people? We've also been chosen to be a trailblazer diocese. There are 7 or 8 of us. We're going to try out new things. We're going to succeed, we're going to fail, we're going to feedback, and we're going to help others on this growing faith journey. I don't think, I hope, none of you sitting in front of me would think growing faith is a bad idea. Focusing on children and young people. Lots of nods, how lovely. It is lovely and nobody ever disagrees. But what's going to change? The phrase that I've been using is changing rhetoric into reality. It's no good nodding and saying, this is marvellous. Yes. What will be different? We need to think outside the box. In fact, we don't even need to think outside the box. We need a new box. And I gave everyone on Bishop's staff team a new box so that they could start filling it with ideas. We need that ministry of imagination, of thinking big, thinking differently. So, what next? I'm going to send you out some papers after the meeting because I didn't want my papers to get muddled up with the 10,000 other papers that you've had to read. So I'm sending mine out afterwards for you to have a look at, and there's so much more information. I'd love you to pray about growing faith, about how can we grow the faith of our children and young people in schools and churches and households. I'd like you to dream big. Thinking of the moon. Think about in 30 years' time, what could our churches look like? How could we be growing faith? And I'd also ask you to go back to your places and be the persistent voice of children and young people and think about, okay, this decision has been made by my PCC, my deanery. What does that mean for children and young people? That's been a whistle-stop tour, and if you'd like me to come and talk at your deanery synod, I would be really delighted to. Thank you.